In the London-centric world of the UK-wide and English media, too little consideration has yet been given to what Brexit means for public spending and for UK devolved government relations. Indeed, what is remarkable about public discussion on Brexit since the 2016 referendum is that it has consistently focused on the wrong things. The divorce bill remains politically toxic, but is fiscally irrelevant. Paying it off as a lump sum would have put the UK net debt GDP ratio up from 87% to 90%, the ratio having been 48% in 2008 before the global financial crisis. The toxicity stems in part from decades of the UK complaining about making huge contributions to Brussels, though in fact net UK contributions are only about 1% of total public spending. My personal view is that the UK should have made a lump sum payment to avoid decades of entanglement with EU decisions concerning liabilities such as EU staff pensions. Another issue is contingent liabilities in relation to the future writing off of loans to off-budget EU entities and third parties. A clean break would have enabled any future financial relationship, such as for research and security collaboration, to be contractually based and financially transparent. However, a lump sum was viewed as politically impossible because the numbers would look too big. Also, the EU 27 and the UK government have had their own reasons to avoid fiscal transparency, whatever they proclaim. There is not going to be any Brexit dividend for public spending. The macroeconomic effects of Brexit on the public finances will be much larger, for example, due to sterling depreciation and GDP growth rates being lower in the medium term than they would otherwise have been. Since both factors are hard to predict clearly in advance, this is a period of massive uncertainties. One scenario is that Brexit will galvanise the UK economy in the long term, freed from EU regulation and the European welfare state model. Another is that Brexit does long-term damage to UK economic growth and productive capacity, thereby producing an affordability crisis for public spending. Whichever scenario applies, the UK public expenditure climate will be harsh in the short and medium term. Generating tax revenues faces multiple threats. The revolt of the rich has territorial as well as interpersonal dimensions. There is stagnant measured productivity, yet the economy is running close to full capacity, so higher public spending would have to be financed by higher taxation and resources must be transferred to exports. Of immediate concern to all three devolved nations is what happens after Brexit to what is currently EU spending in their jurisdictions. The Scottish and Welsh governments have jointly accused the UK government of a power grab in this sphere, for example in agriculture, which is more EU subsidised in the devolved nations than in England. This conflict is a reflection of the tension between the necessity for common frameworks across the UK and the fact that UK Parliament and government see devolved institutions as subordinate legislatures and governments, not as equal partners. In the long term, it is not clear whether present levels of subsidy will be maintained. Trade negotiations with the EU and international agreements will constrain UK-wide subsidy policy. In the short term, the subsidy money could be held centrally by the Treasury or allocated to devolved administrations as annually managed expenditure outside the bloc or put into the Barnett-controlled bloc. If Scotland's constitutional future and Brexit were not enough to consider, there is growing concern about the ability of OECD governments to sustain their tax take as a share of GDP in the face of automation, digitalisation and the power of multinational oligopolies. What does this mean for UK public spending and hence for Scottish public spending? The present UK fiscal austerity, though not deep on an annual basis, is the longest running for a century. Usually, austerity episodes last for 2 or 3 years, then the brakes come off. But 10 years after the 2008 global financial crisis, the repairs to the UK public finances are still not complete. If the UK public wishes to maintain the present pattern of publicly financed services, then most people will have to pay more tax. This can be done transparently or through devices which will accentuate the faults in the UK tax system identified by the Mirrlees report of 2011. If there is no political willingness to do this, then the services that the state provides for citizens will either be openly reduced or allowed to deteriorate to unacceptable standards. To some extent, Brexit has become code for what kind of economy and society lies ahead for the peoples of Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom. The most coherent case for Brexit is made by those who wish to reject what they characterise as a sclerotic European social model of too much public spending and too much taxation, too much welfare and too much regulation. One may doubt how much support there is in England for this position, but the United Kingdom might drift there. Most likely, it would further alienate opinion in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.